That's right. That's right. But no, I was going to ask you this. Like, I know during the winter time, like right now, like when it's cold and stuff like that, one of my favorite things to do is to throw a jerk bait. Like jerk bait used to be thought of just this time of year lure, and I've learned a lot over my career. A jerk bait's good 12 months out of the year. You can catch them on a jerk bait, but it really shines this time of year. And you know, a lot of people like to, you know, jerk them, you know, down. But when it gets real cold like this, a lot of times the best way to catch them on a jerk bait is to actually throw it out there and pull it down, and then just reel up your slack and pull it down. And I learned that technique when we were fishing a tournament on Table Rock. I drew a local hammer over there one time, and he's throwing it out in 30 or 40 foot of water around these standing timber, and he'd throw that jerkbait out there, and I was like, what is he doing with that thing? I've never seen anybody fish a jerkbait like that, but it was real cold, and the shad were like abundant, and they just didn't want to bite, and he would pull that jerkbait down there, and he'd let it sit for a while, and then he'd pull it down, and he caught them pretty good, and I caught them pretty good in that tournament doing that. But I've learned that a jerkbait has become a year-round bait for me, not only during this time, but I catch them about every month of the year now on a jerkbait. About the only time I don't catch them on a jerkbait is if they're on beds, you know. You can catch them pre-spawn, not so much in the spawn, post-spawn. We go up north in the summer and we get around smallmouth, and they hate a jerkbait. And then in the fall, it's great bait in the fall, but it's also a great search bait. You can cover a lot of water with it real fast. And I know you got a lot of flat sides over there, and I wanted to ask you this: I bet you get this question asked a ton, but if you had one crankbait to throw during the cold months of the year, which one would it be?
It's definitely going to be a flat side. And the reason why is exactly what you're talking about that jerkbait. Let me make this make as much sense as I can. When you were, I fished that same tournament at Table Rock. I remember that our boats and all were froze to our trailers, and we couldn't even get them launched in the morning. It was a mess. But when you're jerking that jerkbait, you're causing that jerkbait to go left to right, and that's great if the fish are active enough to want to run it down and get it. But when that water gets down into, like, say, that, it depends on what part of the country you're in, but say here, I'd say if that water gets down into the upper 40s, your shad and your bass, they all become super lethargic. Doesn't mean they won't still eat, but they become less lethargic, and their prey, the shad, is what really changes. The shad start to not run around in dark. They're not as excited. They don't, you see them out there in the summertime and they're just flicking around like they're having a party. They're not doing that. They're sitting there real still. They're not moving very much. And when you pull that jerkbait, that sweeping action, you're just causing that jerkbait to swim. And you're eliminating that left to right. So what you're doing is you're taking that wide action jerkbait and you're turning it into a tight action. Same thing with a flat-sided crankbait. When you take a crankbait, you take the shoulders off of it and you tighten up the body of it. Depending on the bill angle of it, when you pull it, the more bill angle it has, the wider it's going to be, and as that bill angle starts to become flatter, the tighter that bait's going to get. So the colder the water for me, I've got some baits over there. One of them in particular is called a 38. The reason it's called a 38 is because it's made out of a piece of 3/8 inch lumber, so it's super thin. And it's a really tight action bait. And it's absolutely designed for today. It's designed for right now. And so many baits, so many families and categories. When you're fishing this time of the year, you know, that classic we fished up there at Grand that I won, it was just like this. It was like 9 degrees the first morning we took off. And that jig that you showed me to throw, that we were tying in the parking lot the night before, it was a little bitty, tiny little jig that we were cutting the skirt way down on it, and taking a soft plastic bait and cutting it way down and making a real small, compact bait. That's what you need to keep in mind in the wintertime. In the wintertime, you want things that present a real subtle, non-aggressive action, whether it's a jerkbait, a flat-sided crankbait. This is the time of year I like to throw a small profile jig, and I want, if I'm throwing a bait that's like a jig that's going to sink to the bottom, I don't want one that's real heavy, and it's painful. Even if you're fishing out there in 15, 18, 25 foot of water, I'll throw like a 5/16 or a 3/8, just because there's something about that light or jig sinking in there real slow. You wouldn't think it would matter, but it really makes a big difference. But this is the time of the year when fishing that I love the most. And I bet it's the time of year that a lot of professional fishermen love the most, because this is the time of the year where the details, the little bitty tiny details, which is what mine and his true passion is. The reason he likes to make skirts and piddle things, and the reason I did it to a point where I ended up, without even knowing it, building a company, because I didn't really wake up one day and say, you know what, I want to tackle business. I had plenty to do. I just kept piddling with it, and people kept wanting to buy it, and it finally ended up being Black Label. But that passion, what that is, we're trying to build a better mousetrap. We're trying to make something that's better than what we already have in our boat. And this time of the year is when that really shows off. This time of the year, those little tiny little subtle details are the difference between having a successful day on the water and just watching the sunrise.